The Enigma of Unarmed Guardians. Security Director Vextal chittered nervously as he reviewed the scans for the 15th time. His compound eyes refracted light in rapid patterns, a clear sign of stress among the Silurian species. The massive holographic display before him showed the approaching human diplomatic vessel, but something was very wrong with the readings. "Run the scan again," he ordered his assistant, a fluid-based Aquarian whose body rippled with blue and green patterns inside a gravitationally controlled environment suit. "I have already run it 14 times, Director," the Aquarian replied, its voice bubbling through the translator. The results remain consistent. The human security detail carries no detectable weapons. Vextal's antennae twitched in disbelief. This was unprecedented in the 300 cycles he had served as security director for the Galactic Assembly. Every species, without exception, equipped their diplomatic protection details with weapons, often ceremonial, but always functional. It was both tradition and practical necessity. The assembly hall on Station Harmony housed representatives from over 40 spacefaring civilizations, many with centuries of complicated, sometimes bloody, history between them. The massive reception hall glittered under the artificial light of 17 suns, each calibrated to match the home star of a founding member species. Delegates were arriving for the Centennial Treaty renewal, perhaps the most important diplomatic gathering in the last 100 years. The station's defensive systems were on highest alert, and security details from each delegation were prominently displaying their most impressive armaments. The Kravik delegation's guards stomped in wearing powered exoskeletons with shoulder-mounted plasma cannons. The Solarian representatives floated on gravitational disks, their energy staff weapons pulsing with contained stellar fire. Even the notoriously peaceful Elorians had brought their ceremonial peace wands, which Vextal knew could generate a neural disruption field capable of incapacitating most organic life forms within a 20-meter radius. And then there were the humans, the newest members of the Assembly, having only joined 35 years ago, after their unexpected leap to faster-than-light travel. Their diplomatic vessel, a sleek craft named Olive Branch, docked with precision that made even the station's automated systems seem clumsy by comparison. "The airlock is cycling," reported the Aquarian assistant, whose name was first Deep Current, but whom Vextal called Ripple for simplicity's sake. Human delegation emerging. The main view screen showed Ambassador Helena Chen leading the human contingent. She was dressed in what humans called formal attire, a tailored dark suit with minimal ornamentation except for a small pin representing Earth. Behind her walked 4 individuals in similar attire, but with subtle differences that marked them as security personnel. They'd moved with fluid grace, maintaining perfect positioning around the ambassador without appearing to try. "Scan them again," Vextal insisted. Ripple's body flashed with patterns that indicated the Aquarian equivalent of a sigh. "As you wish, Director." Scanning. Results unchanged. No energy weapons, no projectile weapons, no bladed weapons exceeding permitted length. They carry only standard diplomatic credentials, communication devices, and, Ripple paused, something made of plant fiber. Analysis suggests it's called paper, likely diplomatic documents. Vextal's mandibles clicked in agitation. This is unacceptable. It violates all security protocols. Every protection detail must be visibly armed. It's deterrent psychology. Perhaps, Ripple suggested, its fluid form rippling thoughtfully. Humans have a different psychology. Across the reception hall, Ambassador Chen was already engaged in conversation with the Solarian delegation, her security personnel positioned at optimal distances, close enough to respond instantly, yet far enough not to crowd diplomatic space. Vextal observed their movements carefully. There was something about their posture, the way they scanned the room without appearing to do so, that spoke of intense training. "Director," Ripple interrupted his thoughts, "the Kravik head of security is requesting information about human defensive capabilities." Before Vextal could respond, another alert chimed. "The Elorian delegation is asking if our scans missed something." Another chime. The Zentari Collective wishes to know if humans have developed invisibility technology for weapons. Vextal's exoskeleton felt suddenly tight. This was quickly becoming a diplomatic incident. "Tell them we're conducting additional analyses," he replied, then opened a private channel to the human security chief, a stocky individual whose identification tag read Captain Rivera. "Captain, this is Security Director Vextal. I must inform you that assembly protocols require all protection details to be visibly armed. It's a matter of both tradition and practical security measures." The human's face remained neutral, but Vextal detected the slight upward movement of the lips that humans called a smile. "Director Vextal, thank you for your concern. I assure you that the protection of Ambassador Chen meets all required security standards. As for visible armaments, we have found they often create more problems than they solve in diplomatic settings. We prefer a more subtle approach." Vextal's antennae twitched in frustration. "Captain, I must insist." "With respect," Director Rivera interrupted gently. "Earth signed the Assembly Charter with the understanding that each species may implement security according to their own proven methodologies, so long as they don't threaten others. We are not threatening anyone." As the reception continued, Vextal noticed something peculiar. Despite the humans' apparent lack of weapons, other species' security details were giving them unusually wide berth. The Kravik guards, normally aggressive in their positioning, had subtly shifted their formation to maintain extra distance from the humans. The Zentari defense drones had recalibrated their patrol patterns to avoid direct paths near the human security team. "Most interesting," Ripple commented, following Vextal's gaze. "They fear the humans, despite their lack of visible weapons. Or because of it," Vextal replied, a new thought forming. "What if it's intentional? A psychological tactic?" Their conversation was interrupted when the station's sensors detected an anomaly, a power fluctuation in the environmental systems near the diplomatic chamber, where the treaty negotiations would soon begin. Routine diagnostics showed nothing amiss, but Vextal's instincts, honed through centuries of security work, triggered alarm pheromones that his species released during times of danger. "Increase security in the diplomatic chamber," he ordered. "Full sensor sweep, quantum-level detection." As delegates began moving toward the chamber for the opening ceremony, Vextal noticed the human security team had subtly changed their formation. Their casual stance had shifted almost imperceptibly. Weight balanced differently, hands positioned for quicker movement, spacing adjusted to cover more angles. Captain Rivera was speaking quietly into his wrist communicator, his eyes scanning the upper levels of the reception hall. "They know something," Vextal said. The words had barely left his mandibles when the first explosion rocked the station. Emergency containment fields snapped into place as smoke billowed from a service corridor. Chaos erupted as delegates scattered, protective details forming barriers around their charges, weapons drawn and powered. Through the smoke emerged a dozen figures in maintenance uniforms, their forms shifting as chameleonic disguise tech deactivated. They carried prohibited disruptor rifles, weapons designed to penetrate personal shields and standard armor. Leading them was a Kravik exile whose facial markings identified him as Warlord Krasik, a notorious separatist with a bounty in 17 systems. "The treaty dies today," Krasik roared, along with this pathetic attempt at galactic unity. The separatists opened fire, energy blasts cutting through the air. The Kravik delegation's guards returned fire with their plasma cannons, creating a deadly crossfire that sent delegates diving for cover. The Solarians raised energy shields while the Elorians activated their peace wands, filling the air with conflicting energy fields that created dangerous harmonic resonances. In the midst of this chaos, Ambassador Chen remained strangely calm. As a disruptor blast headed directly toward her, Vextal watched in horror, certain he was about to witness the death of Earth's chief diplomat. What happened next would change galactic security protocols forever. Natural weapons forged on a death world. Time seemed to slow as the disruptor blast streaked toward Ambassador Chen. Captain Rivera didn't reach for a hidden weapon. He didn't activate a personal shield. Instead, he simply moved. With speed that Vextal's compound eyes could barely track, Rivera positioned himself in the blast path, simultaneously grabbing a heavy metallic serving tray from a nearby hospitality drone. The disruptor beam struck the tray at an angle Rivera had somehow calculated in a fraction of a second, deflecting harmlessly into a wall where emergency systems instantly absorbed the energy. The other 3 human security personnel moved with equal precision. One female guard named Takahashi vaulted over a decorative fountain, covering 15 meters in a single fluid motion that defied the station's 1.2 G gravity. She landed directly behind 2 separatists, who didn't even have time to turn before she struck them with precisely calibrated blows to nerve clusters that Vextal didn't realize other species could identify in Kravic physiology. The third guard, Ahmad, demonstrated why humans were quietly feared in close-quarters combat. He used a separatist's own momentum against him, redirecting the larger Zentauri's charge into 2 of his companions. The fourth human, Mitchell, had somehow acquired a ceremonial staff from a fallen Solarian guard and was wielding it with such expertise that 3 separatists were keeping their distance despite having ranged weapons. Warlord Krazak, seeing his attack faltering, targeted Ambassador Chen directly, charging toward her with murderous intent. Captain Rivera intercepted him without hesitation. What followed was a combat sequence that would later be studied in security academies across the galaxy. The human used no weapons beyond his own body, yet moved with such calculated precision that the heavily armed and armored Kravic warlord couldn't land a single blow. Rivera seemed to anticipate every attack, redirecting Krazak's considerable strength against him, while targeting neurological weak points that most species didn't even know existed in Kravic physiology. In exactly 27 seconds, all 12 separatists were incapacitated. The human security team had neutralized a heavily armed terrorist cell without firing a single shot or activating a single energy shield. More remarkably, they had calibrated their responses to subdue rather than kill. All attackers were alive, if considerably worse for wear. As station security personnel secured the prisoners, Vextal approached Captain Rivera, who was calmly straightening his tie, as if he'd done nothing more strenuous than walk across the room. That was, Vextal's translator struggled to find an appropriate word. Unprecedented. Rivera nodded politely. We prefer to resolve situations with minimal collateral damage. The ambassador's safety is our priority, but we're also mindful of diplomatic consequences. But how? Vextal's antennae quivered with confusion. Your species has no natural defenses, no claws, minimal muscle density compared to Kravics, no exoskeletons, no venom glands. Ambassador Chen joined them, appearing remarkably composed for someone who had nearly been assassinated. Director Vextal, perhaps this incident demonstrates why traditional assumptions about defensive capabilities need revisiting. Captain, excellent work as always. Within hours, the Galactic Assembly's Security Committee convened an emergency session, with Vextal presenting footage of the human security team's response. Representatives from 24 species watched in stunned silence as the unarmed humans neutralized threats that their own heavily armed guards had struggled against. What you're witnessing, explained Dr. Ilara Tven, the Assembly's chief xenobiologist, is the result of evolution on what might be the most hazardous Class M planet we've encountered. The holographic display showed Earth's varied environments, from Arctic tundra to scorching deserts, storm-lashed coastlines to oxygen-depleted mountain ranges. Humans evolved on a world that demanded adaptation to rapidly changing conditions, Dr. Tven continued. Their planet experiences temperature variations that would kill most species. Their gravity is higher than standard, their atmospheric pressure fluctuates wildly, and their ecosystem contains millions of competing species. The Kravic representative leaned forward, but they lack natural weapons. No species achieves apex predator status without such advantages. Dr. Tven's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture indicating professional disagreement. That's where you're wrong. Humans developed something perhaps more dangerous than claws or venom: adaptability and pattern recognition. They became tool users because they could envision transforming their environment. Their bodies, while seemingly fragile, contain redundant systems and remarkable neuroplasticity. The footage shifted to show Rivera's combat, with Warlord Krasek in slow motion. Notice how the human doesn't just react. He anticipates, calculates trajectories, identifies anatomical vulnerabilities. Humans call this martial arts, systematized combat techniques developed over thousands of years. They turned their bodies into weapons through knowledge and training. The Solarian delegate's energy aura pulsed with skepticism. This cannot be natural ability. They must be enhanced. Captain Rivera, who had been invited to address the committee, stepped forward. No enhancements, Ambassador. Standard human capabilities with appropriate training. Our diplomatic security personnel undergo rigorous selection and preparation, certainly, but nothing beyond our natural potential. Then why not carry weapons? Asked the Elorian representative. Surely they would enhance your capabilities further. Rivera smiled slightly. Several reasons. First, weapons can be taken and used against you. Second, they can malfunction or be disabled. Third, they often escalate situations that might be resolved peacefully. Fourth, he paused, weapons telegraph intent and capability. Sometimes strategic ambiguity is advantageous. The committee chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't been flouting tradition by appearing unarmed. They had been engaging in a subtle psychological operation. Their lack of visible weapons wasn't a vulnerability, but a statement of confidence so profound it bordered on intimidation. In the days that followed, the Galactic Assembly ratified the Centennial Treaty with unprecedented speed and cooperation. The assassination attempt, rather than derailing the proceedings, had created new bonds between previously suspicious delegations. Security protocols throughout the station were being reevaluated, with several species expressing interest in human training methodologies. Vextol found Captain Rivera in the observation deck, gazing out at the vast spiral galaxy visible through the panoramic viewport. Your approach to security has caused quite a revolution in our thinking, Vextol admitted. Though I still have questions. Rivera nodded encouragingly. If these are your diplomatic guards, Vextol asked, what are your actual combat specialists like? Rivera's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes that made Vextol's exoskeleton feel suddenly cold. Let's hope you never need to find out, the human replied quietly. Diplomatic security personnel are selected partly for their restraint. As Vextol processed this statement, Rivera added, you know what's most remarkable about humans, Director? Not our strength or speed or combat techniques. It's that despite evolving on a world that tried to kill us every day, we still chose to seek peace among the stars. We became diplomats before warriors. He turned back to the viewport. But we remember where we came from. 2 weeks later, as delegations prepared to depart Station Harmony, Vextol noticed something peculiar. Several species security details had modified their protocols, carrying fewer visible weapons and focusing more on positioning and awareness. The Kravik Guards, traditionally the most heavily armed, had incorporated hand-to-hand combat techniques into their training regimens. In his final report to the Assembly Security Council, Vextol included a recommendation that would have been unthinkable before the human delegation's arrival. Sometimes, the most powerful statement of capability is the confidence to appear without obvious strength. The humans have demonstrated that true security lies not in the weapons we carry, but in the skills we cultivate and the restraint we exercise. Perhaps in this, as in many things, our newest galactic neighbors have much to teach us. As the human vessel prepared for departure, Ambassador Chen and Captain Rivera exchanged a knowing glance. Their mission had succeeded beyond expectations, not just diplomatically, but in shifting perceptions throughout the assembly. Humanity's place among the stars was now secured not through intimidation or firepower, but through the paradoxical power of appearing unarmed in a universe that expected weapons. The greatest weapons, after all, weren't the ones you displayed. They were the ones you didn't need to show at all.